In June 2022, the EU Commission presented a legislative proposal on the sustainable use of plant protection products, the Sustainable Use Regulation, in short, SUR. The SUR aims to halve the use and risk of pesticides by 2030 in a legally binding way to tackle the challenges of the looming biodiversity and climate crisis. This reform proposal, which has been warmly welcomed by scientists and environmentalists, is currently under fierce attack by several EU member states. What about biodiversity and what do pesticides have to do with it? Who are blocking pesticide reduction? What is at stake? I'm pleased to introduce you to 4 experts today who will explain the urgency around the EU pesticide reduction. Jan Plagge is the president of IFOAM Organics Europe. Professor Josef Settele joins us live from Montreal, where the UN Biodiversity Conference, the COP15, starts tomorrow. And Josef Settele is also co-chair of IPBES. Ramona Duminicioiu is a member of Eco Ruralis, a peasant association in Romania. And Helmut Burtscher-Schaden is one of the representatives of the European Citizen Initiative Save Bees and Farmers and expert on pesticides at Global 2000. After the panel discussion, you will receive individual information on single EU countries in breakout rooms. But now I look forward to hearing more from our experts. Jan Plagge, why has the organic movement supported the ECI Save Bees and Farmers and welcomed the Farm to Fork strategy? The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Why do organic farmers support the Green Deal, the Farm to Fork strategy, and this particularly initiative to reduce the use of pesticides? The first and easy answer is because it works. Because there are a lot of farmers who are for themselves, for the environment, for the citizens, very motivated, skilled and experienced in reducing pesticides in normal agricultural systems up to 0. Not in every culture, not in vineyards and apple orchards, but in more than 90% of organic managed land, we use zero pesticides. And our experiences are that we can contribute to many targets, what we have and combine with the Farm to Fork strategy to get more on farm, on land biodiversity by not using pesticides in a normal farm system. A couple of years ago, when we discussed the design of the Green Deal in agriculture and food systems, we were all convinced, not only the environmental movement, but everybody in scientists and in many political parties, that business as usual is not an option in saving food security and addressing the main challenges of climate change and biodiversity loss. So the most quick and evidence-based approach was to reduce pesticide by enhancing organic farming and other agroecological practices all over in Europe. And the different targets reducing pesticides by 50% and establishing organic farm practices on more than 25% of the land use in Europe is connected. Another goal and expectation of consumers and citizens is connected as well. They want to have nutrition which is not contaminated by residues of pesticides. So all these targets are connected. And the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy especially was the first holistic approach to really change the food and agricultural system. And now it is attacked by many member states, by national governments, especially lobbied by agro-industry to fall back to the old system answers, just to have an intensive agriculture where many organic farmers have already proven that we have a better approach. So from the farmer's perspective, it is really reasonable to adapt the SUR proposal, but it is irresponsible to kill the Green Deal in this important area of food production and land use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. Josef Settele, what about biodiversity and pesticides?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Nice to be here. Well, that question about biodiversity and pesticide at the first glance is very obvious, of course. If you have insecticides, the task is to kill insects. So if they wouldn't do that, it would be a failure in terms of the development. So it's very obvious. It's a kind of risky thing for most, at least insects out there, if you use insecticides or herbicides for herbs or fungicides for fungi. But I would say, if to give us the larger picture in this context, we had this statement in March about the Ukraine war, for example, where we already discussed the issue of, let's say, intensifying or re-intensifying land use in Europe. And there we said, I think there's a quote here now, current political efforts to abandon the sustainability goals of the farm to fork strategy, including a reduction of pesticide use and the restoration of biodiversity, do not protect us from the current food crisis, but lead to a worsening and make the crisis permanent. So that's one very key statement on this issue. I would like now to, based on this, just take a few examples of the already agreed texts we had done in the IPBES, so this global biodiversity body, where we had this summit of policymakers across the globe, where national countries have agreed on certain elements. And some of these include, for example, the pollination assessment was done in 2016 already. There we said it's important to increase habitat heterogeneity on the landscape level, especially in agricultural areas as well. We also said we have to do organic farming, as mentioned before by Jan. That's a quite important component. Diversify farming systems, all of these things also to improve farming and to improve the biodiversity both. And in pesticide field, which was done in a collaboration even with Syngenta and Bayer, who have been partners there, or let's say members. Some of the employees have been members in the offer team to reduce the use of pesticides drastically. And we have some good examples, studies from France, where 70% reduction of insecticide didn't even cause any harm in terms of yields. So that's quite important. And from the global assessment, which I was co-leading with two other colleagues, there's one statement, one important one in the summit of policymakers is D6, feeding humanity, enhancing the conservation and sustainable use of nature are complementary. That can be advanced through sustainable agriculture, aquaculture, and livestock systems, the safeguarding of native species, varieties, breeds, and habitats, and ecological restoration. And one important component mentioned there explicitly is promoting sustainable agriculture and agroecological practices. So the agroecology as a basic idea is going across these different assessments. Also in the recent IPCC one, AR6, it was mentioned again. So I think there's broad consensus in the science field that we have to move in this direction. And I think one very important one within this transformation, which we have to go for, and for which the old-fashioned agriculture is just the opposite. So in this context, one important component is that we have to change the food system. And as soon as we are able to, let's say, live more on plant products than on animal products, which doesn't mean complete vegetarianism, it depends where you are. As soon as we reach this, we have plenty of areas which we can use for production, and there's no need to increase the quantity, but there's a good chance to increase the quality of food products. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josef. Ramona Duminicioiu joins us from Romania and will talk about small-scale farming versus big industrial agriculture. The floor is yours, Ramona.
Thank you so much, and good morning to everyone. Eco Ruralis Association, the association of small-scale farmers that I'm representing here, gathers more than 17,000 small-scale farmers and small-scale food producers in Romania. And together with the National Federations of Beekeepers, ROMAPIS, which is here today, we believe that the strictest possible regulation for all chemical inputs in agriculture and the reduction of the use of pesticides are welcomed measures for the small scale and for the medium food producers, because first of all, it contributes to lowering the cost of production. And this is critical in the current crisis. Also, it will contribute to the health of the environment, the health of the consumers, and the health and safety of people who work or come into direct contact with these toxic substances. Small farmers are the backbones of local food systems, and Romania is a country of small-scale farmers, having more than 4 million people active in agriculture, with more than 90% of these small-scale of the farmers of the country working small plots of land less than 5 hectares. Also in Romania, just to illustrate how important the small-scale farmers are, on 12% of the land of the country, small farms who work less than 2 hectares of land produce 25% of agriculture output. And this is produced mostly through agroecological practices without intensive use of chemicals. We small-scale family farmers support the immediate adoption of the SUR regulation and its effective implementation. The impact of the strict regulation of chemicals and their reduction on small-scale and medium-scale agricultural production will be minimal and rather positive, ensuring cost-effective production, a higher quality of products, better work safety for farmers and for workers. And we are afraid that in the absence of strict regulation, small and medium-scale farmers are usually the most exposed and vulnerable, most of the time not having access to the necessary information to be able to carry out correct treatments and dosages. At the same time, the implementation of SUR can increase consumer safety, confidence in producers who comply with it. It's really important for us to publicly reject voices that have criticized strict chemical regulation and who criticize the reduction of pesticides, using as a pretext the current food and security crisis in the region. This pretext is used to deregulate chemicals or simply to maintain the status quo. We are, the farmers in Europe, both small scale, medium scale, but also industrial scale, we are capable to produce all the necessary food and even better food without the high costs of chemicals. We, on a medium and on a long term, support the drastic reduction of synthetic chemical products with the aim of transitioning towards agroecology, which is compatible with the EU strategy for farm to fork and the Green Deal. We use this opportunity to publicly ask Romania and other undecided states to fully support the adoption of the SUR. If EU countries don't support SUR regulation, they will risk deepening the economic and food crisis, along with risking the health of the environment, especially of bees and of other pollinators, and the health of the people. But last and not least, if the EU countries will not support SUR regulation, they will undoubtedly send a negative message to small-scale family farmers, including beekeepers, who represent the overwhelming majority of people active in agriculture in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramona, for your statement. Helmut Butcher-Schaden, who is blocking pesticide reduction? The floor is yours.
Yeah, someone is blocking pesticide reduction. This is the reason for this press conference. In fact, that there is reason for fearing that the SUR could maybe not be adopted because of wide resistance within some member states. And as I do not want to take your time unnecessarily, I will only comment very briefly here on those points, although important, that are described in detail in the fact sheets that you will get after this press conference. Just a moment. This gives me more time, hopefully, to provide you with the latest relevant information on the text, on the next steps apparently planned by the Czech presidency to create a fait accompli quickly before the end of its presidency, with far-reaching consequences. And this information is not covered by the fact sheet because it is very new. In fact, we got it just yesterday, so the more concrete plans. So let me start before with what we heard. that contrary to what lobbyists of industrial farming, like, for example, Copa-Cogeca and many national farm lobbies are telling us, many farmers are fed up with pesticides. And this is what us as initiators of the Safe Peasant Farmers Initiative really is making happy. But this is something that also the EU was trying to do. The European Union was making commitments to reduce the risk and dependence on pesticides for decades, but the intensity of its use has steadily increased, and sales figures are demonstrating this. So in 2009, the European Commission finally came up with a legislative proposal that was adopted by the European Parliament and by member states. And since then, this proposal is European law. And the provisions of this proposal, it's called the Sustainable Use Directive, so it's not a proposal anymore, may sound familiar to those who have followed the debate on the Sustainable Use Regulation proposal, because the provision of existing law aim to reducing the risk and dependence on pesticides. Secondly, to protecting ecologically sensitive areas. Thirdly, to strengthening the principles of integrated pest management and providing advice and guidance to farmers for more sustainable agriculture. But despite of this legal revolution that happened in 2009, the use of pesticide continued to increase, or at least it did not decrease. That's why in 2017, the successful European Citizens Initiative, ECI, Stop Glyphosate, therefore demanded, as question 3, the Commission to set quantitative targets for pesticide reduction. And the answer from the Commission was, and here, this is a quote, EU policy is already geared towards reducing dependence on pesticides and achieving a pesticide-free future. However, the Commission will review the situation and reassess whether EU-wide mandatory targets for pesticides are needed based on the data obtained. And these data came a few years later by the Court of Auditors, also by reports from the Parliament, and all those reviews came to the conclusion that the objectives of the SUD, so of the Sustainable Use Directive, were not achieved because of a lack of clearly defined targets and of poor implementation by the law through member states. And some even did not implement it at all. So that's why the Commission came up with the SUR. The SUR aims to set clear binding targets. This is a little bit different from the SUD, and it excludes the possibility for bad implementation, because as a regulation, there is no need for implementing the law because the law is binding for all member states. And just that fact, so having the legal obligation that is already existing now implemented by the Commission in a way that one has to follow, this caused outrage among some member states and caused a series of non-papers that attacked SUR, that were signed by a hardcore of about 10 to 12 member states. And this is what started a process that now is threatening the SUR itself. And what I now try to do is share with you a short presentation to illustrate these attacks. Yeah. So what you see on the slide is down the 26 member states. It's 26 because the Czech presidency should be, I say should be, neutral, and therefore it does not officially comment. And what you see are red and green and yellow. This is symbolizing different kinds of reaction on different topics. It started in March with the first non-paper. And as you see, already then there were 12 member states who attacked the SUR, who criticized the legal proposal, who questioned generally the need of pesticide reduction. And maybe this led to the postponement of the presentation, which was scheduled for the 23rd of March, but then it was postponed to June, 1 or 2 weeks before the 22nd of June, when it should have been presented. The second non-paper came out with even more drastic, I would say, attacks on the SUR. And this time it did not have an effect on the presentation. The SUR came out, leading to a third non-paper dealing with the SUR and asking for a second impact assessment. As you know, there has been an impact assessment, so the need for a complementary impact assessment, as these member states called it, was explained by the Ukraine war. And we heard that this is a pretext. But what is really now happening, and this was a council meeting from November 16, is that the Czech presidency took up the demand from those 10 member states for an impact assessment and filed a a decision proposal, which they asked in the meeting to member states, do you support this? Should we ask the Commission for further impact assessment? And what you see here is that meanwhile, a majority, so the red ones and the yellow ones, say, yes, we want another impact assessment. The difference between red and yellow is that the yellow ones say, we do not want to stop negotiating on these issues that are covered by the impact assessment. We do not want to slow the process. So there's still a majority within the member states in favor of not slowing down. But, or what you see here is we have on the one side 10 to 12 member states that are really hardcore in not supporting the SUR. And on the other side, we have also quite big member states, like, for example, France, Germany, and also Spain, and some more that are until now in favor and backing the proposal. So what or why do we fear that the SUR could be killed, as media have already reported with citing some anonymous diplomats from the COREPER, is that, sorry, what is happening here? I should stop sharing. It's just that there will be a vote on this impact assessment, and if this impact assessment will come, this will lead to further delay, and the delay, if it's more than, I would say, it's expected up to 6 months for the Commission to answer this request. This could lead to a fact that the legal file will not be finished within this legal, how do you say, before the next European elections. And this is what we fear could happen, and we are not alone with this. So what we found out yesterday was the thing with the voting plans, and this is not covered in the fact sheet, therefore I will go a bit in detail. The reason why we organized, and at quite short notice, this press conference is is the aim to shed light on this upcoming vote that calls, and of course also to call on to the decision makers in the member states to just do the right thing. And this vote was first set to most probably happen during the Agri-Fish, so the council meeting on agricultural ministers on 12th or the 13th of December. But yesterday, information has accumulated that the Czech presidency could have found a much smoother and silent way to get this far-reaching decision through. And it will take only 3 steps. Step 1 turned out to be already today. So the presidency will ventilate according to sources from the Parliament and member states, will ventilate the draft decision to all agri ministers in the member states so that they will give their thumbs up, or as we hope, their thumbs down to this move to delay the legal fight. Step 2 then would be that this decision will be brought on paper in the meeting of the Permanent Representatives Committee, so the COREPER in Brussels, that is scheduled for next Saturday. So this vote during the weekend is necessary to meet all deadlines for procedural stuff like linguistic and also legal checks, translating the decision proposal into all the European languages, and so on. If this is done in step 3, and this is really smooth, formal adoption is planned in one of the forthcoming council meetings, and the most probable council meeting would be that of Transport, Telecommunication and Energy Council. So something that has nothing to do with pesticides, environment and health, or not much to do with that. And it will be there as an A point. That means no political debate. When the meeting is closed, all A points are regarded as automatically decided, so that no one from outside will normally spot what's happening. So no newspaper will report if this is not told, this story. And that's why we tell the story here. In the press release that we will send out afterwards, there will be also some explanation on that. So this was a reason why I was not able to prepare myself so good for this presentation. So let me finalize here that we, and when I say we, it's the Safe Bees and Farmers Citizens Initiative, think from a democratic point of view. This approach by the Czech presidency for a decision with such far-reaching consequences for our health, for food safety and livelihoods is unacceptable. Not to say a democratic scandal. This is even more the case since we got to know also very recently that the Czech presidency plans to use this pathway also for another highly problematic decision point. It is a prepared draft decision that we also got very recently that would close the highly disputed point of protection of sensitive areas from poisonous pesticides. This issue has been a red flag for some member states from the beginning. Although,
sorry, I did not understand. What was the second subject you have been talking about?
Yeah, the second subject is the sensitive areas. So the sewer proposal provides for a ban of pesticides on sensitive areas. There have been already discussions if this ban should be only for synthetic pesticides and which sensitive areas would be covered for a total ban and things like that. Now the Czech presidency came up with a proposal for a first closing the file in this article. So for a first common position of member states. And from what we could read from a very, very first draft reading, because we got it yesterday very late in the afternoon, early in the evening, is that this proposal would really water down the level of protection very, very much. So it's not only that the Czech presidency wants to set fait accompli with this impact assessment that could delay the whole and kill the whole proposal. They also try to make an end to this discussion, but an end to the bad with the sensitive areas. So therefore, we appeal to the representatives of member states, of the 27 member states, to the governments, please check thoroughly if whatever your agricultural minister will be advising to the permanent representatives of your country with regard to the votes next Saturday. That means impact assessment and sensitive areas. Please check, is this in the interest of your government? Is it reflecting what the majority of the people in your country would vote for? And third, is it in the interest of the future of farming and maintaining food security on the long run? From this background, we in particular ask the responsible ministers of the environment and ministers of health to consider if what your colleague from the Ministry of Agriculture have prepared as a position of your country, is this properly aligned with your ministries and in line with the need to protect the environment and people's health? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Helmut. We stop the recording.